Shabbat Shalom, dear congregation, and thank you once again for being here, for coming, taking the time to be with us and celebrate as a community. Shabbat Shalom. This past week, we observed the commemoration of Tisha B'Av, the 9th of the Hebrew month of Av, as Cantor Leslie mentioned, one of the most solemn days in the Jewish calendar, on which we remember the destruction of the first and second temples in Jerusalem, as well as other traumatic events in our history. I had the privilege of attending the reading of the Book of Lamentations, Eicha, which we read on Tisha B'Av, when Cantor Leslie and some of our congregants gathered on Main Street in the Asper campus to listen to the chanting of the ancient account of the destruction of the temples and the city of Jerusalem, often attributed to the prophet Jeremiah. As we sat there in the heart of the Jewish Community Center, my daughter says we looked somewhat like a poet society in deep concentration, surrounded by the posters of the hostages of October 7th, and listening intently as the cantor chanted the scrolls in Hebrew and concluded with two poems about kibbutz Be'eri, the ancient and the more recent, somehow intertwined. My mind began to wander, and I started looking through the English translation of the 5 chapters of Lamentations. I felt, as I was reading the English, that I was reading the account of the atrocities that had been committed on October 7th. It was shocking to read the similarities describing the violence against the population, the heinous acts committed against women, and even the description of the indifference of the nations that refused to accept and acknowledge the breadth of the destruction that had been committed. It was as if I was reading what had just happened. Our people have suffered terrible and traumatic experiences throughout the millennia, and opportunities like Tisha B'Av are there for us to remember, but also to learn the difference between good and evil, and about the kind of people we want to be as a nation. Just as Judaism offers a framework to mourn the death of a loved one after 7 days of Shiva, we pull ourselves out of mourning and we continue to live. There is a commandment to choose life and to thrive and to live in happiness. Mitzvah gedola liot besimcha, even when we may not be feeling it. We've got to show it for the sake of those around us. We have somehow as a people been able to rise above the pain and the mourning, to achieve greatness and contribute to innovation and initiatives to make our world a better place, to repair the world, letaken olam. Turning to today's parsha, Veetchanan, which means I entreated, or I tried very, very hard to persuade someone to do something. The Parsha describes how Moses tells the people of Israel how he implored God to allow him to enter the land of Israel. But God refused, instructing him instead to ascend to a mountain and see the promised land. Moses explains how hard he tried to convince God to let him to go into the land, Veetchanan. Continuing his review of the Torah, Moses describes also great events in our history, from the exodus from Egypt and the giving of the Torah, declaring them unprecedented events in human history. Has there ever occurred this great a thing, or has the likes of it ever been heard? Did you ever hear the voice of God speaking out in the midst of fire and live as Moses did? You were shown to know that the Lord God, there is none else beside him. We even sing after the Shema, Mi kamocha belohim Adonai, who is as great as you, as we remember the events of the parting of the Red Sea. These are also great events. We have the tragic and we have the happy. Moses predicts that in future generations, the people will turn away from God, worship idols, and be exiled from their land and scattered among the nations. We have experienced this as a people. But from there, they will seek God and return and obey his commandments. Our Parsha also includes a repetition of the Ten Commandments, as you have heard, and the Shema, which declare the fundamentals of the Jewish faith, the unity of God, the mitzvot of love to God, studying Torah, binding these words upon our arms for our actions, our heads for our thoughts, and affixing them upon our homes and our gates so we think about them and we act upon them. These aren't just ideas. These are ideas that we bring into action. So on one hand, we're coming out of Tisha B'Av, a time of darkness and despair. And now this week, we head into a moment recounting the glorious time of liberation from the bondage of the slavery in Egypt and the giving of our Torah. The Haftorah begins with the words, as you heard, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, be comforted, my people. Yes, today we do need to be comforted from the trauma of October 7th, from the anti-Semitism we see in the world around us, and the indifference of the nations to the horrors that were committed. But we know there is always hope for our people. We've been through this before. And as Moses predicts in the Parsha, the Jewish people may be exiled, but will ultimately return to the land of Israel. As we come out of the 3-week period of mourning that culminates in Tisha B'Av, we prepare to celebrate Tu B'Av, the 15th of the month of Av, which was an ancient biblical celebration of love. Forgotten for many years, this beautiful celebration of matchmaking and love has been revived in modern Israel and will be celebrated once again in our community this coming Monday evening by our young adult group. And if you know anybody or you yourself would like to come to the event, please see me after the service. Nachamu Ami, be strong, my people. Be kind to each other, for if we stick together and support one another, we can withstand the hardships and difficult times. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom, serenity, and comfort.